I joked you should get married.
I will, if you ask me.
The Arizona desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of red earth and sage that swallowed the horizon whole. I had stopped at a weather trading post somewhere between nowhere and forgotten, the kind of place that exists on outdated maps and in the memories of long-haul truckers. My rental car had been making a grinding noise for the last 50 miles, and I needed water, both for the radiator and myself. What I found instead would change everything I thought I knew about courage, connection, and the walls we build around our hearts. She was standing behind the counter when I walked in, and I'll never forget that first moment. Her hands were arranging turquoise jewelry on a worn velvet cloth, each piece catching the dusty sunlight that filtered through the window. She was Apache, perhaps in her early 30s, with dark eyes that seemed to hold entire conversations before a single word was spoken. Her hair fell in a thick braid over her shoulder, and she wore a simple cotton dress with traditional beadwork at the collar. There was something about her presence that commanded attention without demanding it, a quiet strength that filled the small space. "Radiator trouble?" she asked, not looking up from her work. Her voice was warm, touched with amusement. I blinked, startled. "How did you? You're the third person this week with that grinding sound. The road out here eats cars for breakfast." She finally looked up, and when she smiled, it was like sunrise breaking over the canyon walls. "I'm Nascha. It means owl. My grandmother said I was born watching everything, always observing." I introduced myself, and she directed me to the water spigot outside. When I returned, she had cold lemonade waiting, made from real lemons, sweet and tart in perfect balance. We began to talk, and what I thought would be a 10-minute stop stretched into an hour, then 2. Nascha had a way of asking questions that made you want to share pieces of yourself you normally kept hidden. She told me about growing up on the reservation, about learning the old stories from her grandmother, about the trading post that had been in her family for 3 generations. "People don't stop much anymore," she said, gazing out the window at the empty highway. "GPS takes them around us. They're in such a hurry to get somewhere that they forget to be anywhere." She turned back to me with that knowing smile. "But the ones who do stop, the ones who break down or get lost or just follow their instincts, those are the ones who need to be here. The desert has a way of bringing people to the places they're meant to find." I found myself returning the next day, telling myself I wanted to buy some of her jewelry for my sister. Then the day after that, bringing coffee I'd picked up from a town 30 miles back. Each visit revealed new layers. Nascha was an artist who worked in silver and stone, creating pieces that told stories. She was a reader who devoured everything from philosophy to mystery novels. She volunteered at a youth center on the reservation, teaching traditional crafts to kids who were caught between 2 worlds. She had a laugh that started soft and built like a thunderstorm, and a way of tilting her head when she listened that made you feel like the most important person in the universe. On the 4th day, as I was preparing to leave Arizona and return to my corporate job in Seattle, I found myself confessing things I'd never told anyone. About the engagement I'd broken off 2 years ago because I couldn't shake the feeling that I was following someone else's script for my life. About the promotion I'd turned down because it meant less time being human and more time being a title. About the gnawing sense that I was sleepwalking through a life that looked perfect on paper but felt hollow in my chest. Nascha listened without judgment, without offering easy platitudes or unsolicited advice. When I finished, she simply nodded and said, "You know what's missing. The question is whether you're brave enough to go looking for it." The next morning, I should have been on the highway heading north. Instead, I found myself pulling up to the trading post one more time, telling myself I was just saying goodbye properly. Nascha was outside, tending to a small garden of desert plants, prickly pear, sage, and something with tiny yellow flowers that I couldn't name. She looked up as I approached, unsurprised, as if she'd been expecting me. "Couldn't leave without one more glass of lemonade?" she asked, amusement dancing in her eyes. "Something like that," I admitted. We sat on the weathered bench outside the trading post, watching the morning light paint the distant mesas in shades of amber and rose. The silence between us was comfortable, the kind of quiet that only exists between people who've managed to bypass small talk and stumble into something real. My grandmother used to say that the desert tests you, Nascha said eventually. It strips away everything unnecessary until only truth remains. No pretending, no hiding behind who you think you should be. She glanced at me sideways. You've been tested this week. What did you find? I considered her question carefully. That I've been living like a tourist in my own life. Passing through, taking pictures, but never really staying anywhere long enough to matter. And now? Now I don't know what to do with that information. Nascha smiled, but there was something melancholy in it. Most people don't. They have the revelation, feel it burn bright for a moment, then let it fade as soon as they cross back into their regular world. They tell themselves it was just a phase, just the desert playing tricks on their heart. She stood, brushing dust from her dress. But you don't strike me as most people. We spent the day together, and it felt both completely natural and absolutely terrifying. She showed me her workshop, where silver jewelry in various stages of completion covered every surface. Each piece was unique, many incorporating traditional Apache symbols, spirals for journey, mountain designs for stability, lightning for swift action. She explained how her grandmother had taught her that jewelry wasn't just decoration but a way of carrying stories and protection with you. This one, she said, holding up a silver cuff bracelet with an intricate maze design, represents life's path. See how it wins and doubles back. The way forward isn't always straight. Sometimes you have to get lost to find where you were meant to be all along. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the workshop, I found myself watching her hands as she worked, the sure movements of someone completely aligned with their purpose. There was such peace in her focus, such certainty. I envied it even as I was drawn to it. You should get married, I blurted out suddenly, the words escaping before I could catch them. It was meant as a joke, a clumsy attempt to lighten the intensity one was feeling, to deflect from the dangerous thoughts forming in my mind. Someone like you shouldn't be alone out here. You should have someone, a family, the whole thing. The workshop went very quiet. Nascha set down the piece she was working on, her movements deliberate and slow. When she turned to face me, her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, vulnerability mixed with courage, hope tangled with risk. I will, she said softly, if you ask me. Time stopped. The desert held its breath. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, where one step forward would be a leap into the unknown, and one step back would be a retreat into the safe, hollow life I'd been questioning all week. Her words hung in the air between us, not quite a proposal but something more than a hypothetical, an invitation to choose possibility over fear. Nascha, my voice cracked. I was joking. I live in Seattle. I leave tomorrow. We've known each other less than a week. I know, she said calmly. And I'm serious. Not because I think you're perfect or because I have some romantic notion about fate. I'm serious because in 4 days, you've shown me more genuine curiosity, more real interest in who I actually am, than most people show in 4 years. Because when you talk about your life, I see someone who's been searching for permission to be authentic, and I want to be the person who tells you that you don't need permission, you just need courage. She moved closer, and I could see the pulse beating at her throat, the only sign that she was as nervous as I was. I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe the desert brought you here for a reason. That maybe what you're looking for isn't in Seattle or anywhere else on a map. Maybe it's in the choice to stop running and start building something real. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this was insane, impulsive, the kind of decision made by people who didn't think about consequences. But another voice, one I'd been ignoring for too long, whispered that maybe insanity was continuing to live a life that felt like slow suffocation. Maybe the truly insane thing was getting back in my car, driving away, and pretending this week had been nothing but a pleasant detour. I didn't answer her immediately. Instead, I asked if I could stay one more day, and then another. Nascha agreed without pressing, giving me space while remaining present, a balance I was beginning to understand was characteristic of everything she did. During those days, she introduced me to her world with patient generosity. We visited her grandmother, a woman in her 80s who lived in a small house on the reservation, surrounded by family photographs and the smell of fry bread. The grandmother studied me with eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone straight to intention. She spoke in Apache, and Nascha translated, "She says you have good hands but a confused heart. She says your heart knows the way, but your head keeps arguing with it. She wants to know which one you're going to listen to." I met Nascha's friends from the youth center, teachers and artists and elders who had chosen to stay on the reservation and build something meaningful rather than chase easier opportunities elsewhere. They welcomed me with cautious warmth, protective of Nascha but willing to let me prove myself. I helped paint a mural at the center, my corporate-trained hands clumsy with a brush but eager to contribute something tangible. One evening, we drove deep into the desert and hiked to a plateau where the sunset turned the sky into a canvas of impossible colors, purple, orange, pink, and gold bleeding into each other. We sat on the warm stone and watched darkness slowly claim the land, stars emerging one by one until the sky was thick with them. "I need to tell you something," Nascha said. "I don't want you to think I'm some perfect answer to all your questions. I have my own complications. The trading post barely breaks even most months. The roof needs replacing. I have student loans from the art degree I got before realizing I learned more from my grandmother than any professor could teach me. I get scared sometimes, wonder if I'm just being stubborn staying here when I could make more money in Phoenix or Albuquerque." She pulled her knees to her chest, suddenly looking younger, more vulnerable. "And I've been hurt before. There was someone, a few years ago, a photographer who came through. We fell fast and hard, and he promised he'd come back after his assignment ended. He didn't. I waited longer than I should have, made excuses for him until I couldn't anymore. So I understand fear. I understand why the smart thing might be to protect yourself, to not risk it again." I reached over and took her hand. It was rough from work, strong and warm. "Then why are you willing to risk it now?" She turned to me, and in the starlight, her eyes were luminous. "Because I promised myself that if I ever felt this again, this recognition, like meeting a part of myself I didn't know was missing, I wouldn't let fear win. Because spending my life safe and alone seems like a slower, sadder death than risking everything for a chance at something extraordinary." The truth crashed over me like a wave. I'd been asking the wrong questions. It wasn't about whether this made sense or whether I could guarantee a happy ending. It was about whether I was willing to choose aliveness over safety, connection over comfort, possibility over predictability. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "Everything in me says this is crazy. We're practically strangers. What if we're wrong? What if this is just some desert fever dream and we wake up in 6 months wondering what we were thinking? Then we'll deal with that," Nascha said simply. "But what if we're right? What if this is exactly what it feels like when you finally stop overthinking and start living? Are you really going to walk away from that because there aren't any guarantees?" I thought about my life in Seattle, the apartment that had never felt like home, the job that paid well but meant nothing, the friends I kept at arm's length because I was never quite sure who I was supposed to be around them. I thought about how I'd been existing rather than living, checking boxes on someone else's list rather than writing my own story. "Ask me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Nascha's breath caught. "What? You said you'd get married if I asked. So I'm telling you, ask me. Ask me to stay. Ask me to take the leap with you. Ask me to choose this wild, uncertain, terrifying, beautiful thing instead of the safe path back to a life that's killing me slowly." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she was also smiling, that sunrise smile that had first captured my attention. "Will you stay?" she asked. "Will you build a life with me here in this difficult, beautiful desert?" Will you help me fix the roof and serve lemonade to strangers and teach kids to make jewelry and argue about books and weather the hard times and celebrate the good ones? Will you marry me? Yes, I said, and the word felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Yes, to all of it. Practical details were complicated. There were jobs to quit, apartments to sublet, belongings to sort through and decide what mattered enough to keep. My friends in Seattle thought I'd lost my mind. My parents were concerned, then skeptical, then cautiously hopeful when they heard the certainty in my voice. Nascha's family was protective but welcoming, watching carefully to make sure I was serious, that I understood what I was committing to. We got married 3 months later, a small ceremony that blended traditions, Apache blessings and exchange of gifts, along with conventional vows we wrote ourselves. Under a ramada decorated with sage and wildflowers, surrounded by the vast desert sky, I promised to choose her every day, to build something real together, to have the courage to stay even when things got difficult. And they did get difficult. The first year was an adjustment that tested us both. I had to learn to live at a different pace, to find purpose in work that wasn't about climbing ladders or maximizing quarterly earnings. I took over managing the Trading Post's online presence, building a website that attracted customers from around the world. I learned silverwork from Nascha, my pieces crude at first but improving with patience and practice. Some days I questioned everything, wondered if I'd made a massive mistake, if I was just playing at a life rather than living one. But Nascha had a way of anchoring me during those storms of doubt. "You're doing it again," she'd say gently. "Living in your head, arguing with yourself instead of being present in your actual life. Look around. You're here. We're here. That's real." And it was. The calluses on my hands from work were real. The satisfaction of creating something beautiful from raw materials was real. The community we were building, friends who became family, customers who became friends, kids at the center who started calling me uncle, all of it was undeniably, powerfully real in ways my old life had never been. 2 years in, we expanded. Using money from online sales and a small business loan, we fixed the roof and added a studio space for workshops. We started hosting weekend classes where people could come learn traditional Apache crafts, hear the old stories, experience something authentic in a world that felt increasingly hollow and mass-produced. The Trading Post became more than a business, it became a gathering place, a bridge between worlds, a reminder that connection and craftsmanship and story still mattered. One afternoon, a man about my age pulled up in a rental car, that familiar grinding sound announcing his arrival. He looked exhausted, wrung out, like someone running on empty for too long. I watched him wander in, saw Nascha greet him with that warm smile, offer him cold lemonade without being asked. I felt a jolt of recognition. He was me, 3 years ago. Lost and looking for something he couldn't name, brought here by circumstances that felt like coincidence but might have been something more. "Radiator trouble?" I asked, walking over. He looked surprised. "How did you?" "The road out here is hard on cars," I said, smiling. "But sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen. Sometimes you need to break down to find your way." I directed him to the water spigot, and Nascha caught my eye across the room, her expression warm with shared understanding. We both knew he probably wouldn't just stop for water and leave. The desert had a way of keeping people who needed to be kept, of offering chances to those brave enough to take them. Later that evening, after the stranger had left with multiple assurances that he'd probably be back tomorrow, Nascha and I sat outside the Trading Post, watching the sun paint the mesas in familiar, ever-changing colors. "Do you think he'll come back?" she asked, leaning into me. "Maybe. Probably. The desert brought him here for a reason." I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of sage and silver polish and home. "Just like it brought me." "No regrets?" she asked, a question she'd stopped asking months ago but occasionally still wondered. "Only one," I said, and felt her stiffen slightly. "That I didn't ask you that first day. That I wasted even a moment considering not choosing this." She relaxed, laughing softly. We got here eventually. That's what matters. And she was right. We had gotten here, to this life built on courage and choice, on daily commitments and shared purpose, on the radical decision to stop running and start rooting. It wasn't always easy. There were hard months and disagreements and moments of doubt. But it was real. It was vivid. It was alive in ways I hadn't known life could be. I thought about all the people still trapped in lives that look good from the outside but feel hollow within, the ones who keep waiting for permission to choose differently, who keep postponing joy and meaning until some future moment when conditions are perfect. I wanted to tell them that perfect never comes. That the only moment you have is the one you're standing in. That courage isn't the absence of fear but the decision to leap anyway, to trust that you'll build wings on the way down. The desert stretched endlessly around us, that vast red expanse that had witnessed countless lives and stories, that continued to offer second chances to broken-down travelers willing to see obstacles as opportunities. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began their nightly emergence. Somewhere out there, someone else was probably considering whether to take a safe path or a true one, whether to listen to logic or leap toward possibility. I hoped they'd choose the leap. I hoped they'd find their own version of a weather trading post and a woman with a sunrise smile. I hoped they'd discover what I had learned in this place, that the life you're meant to live is rarely the one you planned, that home isn't a location but a choice, and that sometimes the greatest adventure begins the moment you stop joking about possibility and start saying yes to what terrifies and thrills you in equal measure. Nascha squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back, two people who had taken a wild chance on each other and found that courage, more than any other virtue, was the one that made everything else possible.